Hello, hello, hello out there in Internetsville. How are y'all doing today? Awesome! Great, good. I'm glad I could hear you through the computer Matron. Today we're doing Adventures in Japanese 3. We're starting with Chapter 2. I'm going to explain the grammar. For those of you who want to follow along with the Adventures in Japanese series that I'm slowly working through, go ahead and buy the textbook. You can go to my resources page. If you buy something from my resource page, I get like a 4% cut or something like that. Amazon will say, thanks for advertising, give me some money. And I make a tiny pittance of a sale on it. So please, if you want to buy some of these books, please buy through my website. Please also donate. Doing this costs money. As you can see, we have electricity going, and then I'm actually spending time doing this. I'm trying to make it free, and it'll never not be free. I'm going to make sure it stays free all the time, because education should be free. I'd appreciate some donations. That'd be great, guys. I got my first donation. That's why I suddenly want to make all these videos. But then something happened, like my computer broke, my car got crashed into, I went to Chicago, the Mitsuwa store. Anybody in Chicago? Mitsuwa is a great place to go. The Mitsuwa store didn't have its good ramen shop. Ooh. It didn't have its bookstore. Anyway, lots of crap in my life happened. Videos got didn't get made as quickly as I wanted to. English I speaky. Alright, Adventures in Japanese 3, Chapter 2. Yosh! Going to start off with grammar point D, okay? It's a little bit confusing, but just flip your book open to page D. Grammar point D in Chapter 2. And let's take a look at this. I want to emphasize how uber important this grammar point is. This grammar point is uber important. In fact, I don't know why they're waiting to Chapter 3 to explain this. Book 3 to explain this. In my series, like if you go to lessons page, my series, this is going to happen in maybe 4 or 5 lessons. I'm going to try to have this done before lesson 30. This is uber important in my opinion. A basics lesson 30. In fact, I'm not going to jump into advanced lessons until we get to this, because this is very, very, very important. Alright, if you want to sound more Japanese, this is quite possibly the most important grammar point that you can ever encounter. We're going to learn to make sentences such as, the man that eats cake is barfing. You notice there are 2 sentences in that. The man who eats cake is all explaining the man, and then we're telling what that man is doing. We're saying he is barfing. So there's a man, he eats cake, and there's the man, who's the same man, who's barfing. The man who eats cake is barfing. Okay? We're going to make these compound sentences. Really quickly before we begin, I want to point out something. I don't know what the exact professional term in super professional, English professor guy's laboratory is called. The literatures have laboratories. But we're going to call the sentence that it describes the noun, the man who eats cake, we're going to call that a clause. Okay? That's what we're going to call that thing. The man who eats cake is barfing. The clause is the man who eats cake. The woman who sleeps late is, I don't know, pregnant. Why is that the first thing I think of? The woman who sleeps late is going to be the clause. The idiot who teaches English is also teaching Japanese. So who teaches English? That's the clause, okay? The rest of the sentence, the important part, the actual meat and potatoes of the sentence, he teaches English, she is sleeping, she is pregnant. What was the first one? Barfing? We're going to call the main sentence, because that's actually what we're saying. The man who reads manga is a nerd. Think about that sentence. The man who reads manga is a nerd. The actual sentence is, the important meat and potatoes of the sentence is, the man is a nerd, and the man who eats, I keep saying eat, the man who reads manga is just describing who that man is. This is a little bit of an English lesson, because this is so subtle, and yet it's so important, okay? The man who reads manga is a nerd. Reading manga is explaining the man. Do we got that? The thing who's reading manga is the man, and this man is also a nerd. We're saying the man's a nerd, but just to clarify, which man? The man who reads manga. we're using an entire sentence to describe a noun. Okay? We do this in English, we can do this in Japanese. If you want to sound more Japanese, you need to learn how to do this. Okay? Let's begin. We're modifying a noun with a verb. In fact, this could even be an entire sentence. We're modifying a noun with a sentence. Taberu, hito. This is the noun, hito, person, and this is the verb that we're modifying the man with. Notice, starting up, let's use, screw it, we'll use blue. Plain form. Almost any time that we're going to modify a noun with a verb, it's in some form of the plain form. Plain negatives, plain pasts, plain negative past, or just straight up plain kaeru forms, which is the same thing as a plain form. But anyway, we're not important. Okay, so in this sentence, which isn't a sentence, this small chunk, it's actually just a noun clause, or just a noun clause. Taberu hito we can translate as a person. We don't know if it's the person or a person. That's a little strange thing in English. A person who, in English we have to use this who, eats. Okay? A person who eats. Okay? Let's extend the sentence. Sorry, I'm talking to the chalkboard. I should never do that. Let's extend the sentence by actually saying what this person is actually doing. So the person who eats, he's reading a book. Taberu hito. Let's use a different color than green. Sorry, I only have 4 colors. We'll go with black. Wa hon o yon. I hope I got the kakijin right. Yonde imasu. Taberu hito. Sorry, taberu. I'm talking into the board again. Taberu hito wa hon o yonde imasu. The person who eats is, the reason why it's is reading is because it's the de imasu form, is reading a book. The person who eats reads a book. Okay? Now let's be even more clear about what we're doing. Let's make a new sentence, or let's add to this sentence to explain, yeah, sure, well, the man who eats, that's not very descriptive. I mean, I ate. You know, I eat every day. Don't you? So are you a person? Yeah, probably. I hope so. Any aliens, I don't want to offend you. Or robots, or zombies. However, we're probably people, and we're probably people who eat. So that's not very specific. For the record, this taberu could also be who will eat, but let's not get into that. What does the person eat? Let's say he eats, the guy who eats cheese. Cheese o taberu hito wa hon o yonde imasu. The person who eats cheese is reading a book. The person who eats cheese is reading a book. Alright, that's kind of how we do this, okay? That's how this works. We can use an entire sentence to modify a noun, and then make this noun do something. Okay? This noun does not have to be the subject. So let's just switch the subject and the object. It won't make any sense, but let's switch the object and the subject. Cheese o tabeteru hon o hito ga. Or this could be a wa too. Hito wa cheese o tabeteru hon o yondemasu. Hito wa, is there any verb modifying the word hito? No, there's no verb modifying the word hito. Where is the verb modifying a noun? See this verb? It's modifying a noun. It's directly related to the noun. It's right in front of it. We're modifying the word book. So this sentence is now the person, and because the verb is yondemasu, is reading This should actually be in the black ink because it's black up there, is reading a book. And then this whole clause, remember we're calling this a clause, is going to be added here, that. Notice how in English we have to, if it's a person we say who, and if it's a thing we switch to that. Japanese we don't do that. Nothing like that in Japanese. That eats cheese. The person is reading a book that eats cheese. We're using a verb, a plain form verb, exactly like an E adjective in order to modify a noun. Once again, we're using a plain form verb just like an E adjective in order to modify a noun. There's one more thing I wanted to add about this. What if the clause, remember that's the descriptive sentence, what if the clause has a subject in it? And we're using that clause with a subject in it to modify another item that is a subject. Okay, when you have a clause with a subject in it, for now just focus on reading it. When you have a clause that has a subject in it, it either gets ga or no. The main sentences, subjects should probably get a wa. Maybe not always. These rules are not always true, but generally, you know, 85% of the time, generally, the main sentence should have a wa in it. Okay, the wa as the particle. Why is this? Wa is indeed the topic marker. However, it's also used as the sort of super subject marker. Whereas ga is sometimes is used for clauses and things like that. This is true for almost any sort of a clause that you run into. Just further blurs the line between the difference between wa and ga. Sorry about that. It's just true. However, one more time, I want to emphasize this: the clause, the subject can either get ga or no. Eban sensei no tabete ita asa gohan wa oishii desu. Let's look at this sentence. Eban sensei no or ga tabete ita asa gohan wa oishii desu. The breakfast, this can be translated as, the breakfast that Mr. Evan was eating, that's Mr. Evan to you, is good, is delicious, is tasty. So remember, in English we put the clause in between the subject and the noun and the verb. In Japanese we put it before the noun we're modifying. Okay? Why should I bother using no? Isn't God the correct way? I mean, yeah, that's true, but using no is also correct. And let me explain to you why, and what the difference is between using no and ga. It's a very subtle difference. When we translate to English, we don't even bother making the distinction of using no and ga. However, logically and grammatically, there is a small difference in Japanese. If we say, Eban sensei ga tabete ita asa gohan wa oishii desu. Eban sensei ga, if we're using the ga, Eban sensei is actually part of the clause. In fact, let's change ga to red because it's part of the clause. Oops, sorry. Hiragana. Eban sensei ga tabete ita asa gohan. Eban sensei becomes part of the clause. Okay? If we change this no, if we use a no, Eban sensei kind of becomes green. When we use a no, it's not the breakfast that Evan was eating. It's Evan's breakfast that he was eating, that was being eaten. Evan's being eaten breakfast. Evan's being eaten breakfast. Do we see the difference? If we use ga, it's back to red. Red is ga. If we use ga, it's the breakfast that Evan was eating. It's all one chunk. If we're using no, this is part of the main sentence. It's not just Eban sensei no asa gohan. It would become Eban sensei no asa gohan. Eban sensei no asa gohan. It's part of the main sentence, but we're going to describe which Gohan. Oh, it was the Evan Sensei's Gohan that was being eaten. So it's Mr. Evan's breakfast that was being eaten, as opposed to Evan Sensei's the breakfast that Evan Sensei was eating. Let's write this down, okay? If we use ga, we officially should translate it like this. And I just realized that I completely screwed this up. Alright. Give me 1 second to polish this up. Boom, second. Okay, here we go. Using ga, the breakfast that Mr. Evan was eating is good. Because with ga, it's red, it's part of the clause. Evan Sensei becomes part of the clause. Evan Sensei ga tabete ita, asa gohan wo oishii desu. The breakfast that Mr. Evan was eating is good. Sorry, I'm talking into the whiteboard. Now, let's switch it to no. When we use no, we translate it as Mr. Evan's breakfast that he was eating is delicious. In order to Englishify the sentence, we have to use the word he. Okay, I hope we see the difference. I'm spending way too much time on this difference. It's not that important, but I'm explaining to you what the logical difference is and why there's a no and a ga connection. Do you see how those two sentences mean the same thing and yet are slightly different? Same thing in Japanese. Alright, we're going to go on to new grammar points. Hey there, this is me again. My shirt changed color because last time you might notice, if you look carefully enough, actually maybe you can't see it, but I accidentally stabbed myself with a dry erase marker in the previous grammar point, so I switched shirts. Anyway, it's not too important. I hope you don't care that much. Next, I want to focus on grammar point A, which is essentially grammar point D. So really quickly, just to point out what I mean, if you'll notice, grammar point A is a noun followed by to another noun. This iu is the verb imasu in the plain form iu, imasu, and there's the iu nakata, things like that. And so it's a verb followed by a noun. This is almost nothing more than the grammar point. You're quoting somebody talking, then you follow with to iimasu, to iimashita. But then you're just putting it in the plain form, and then I made it in the past tense. Let's just keep it in the plain tense. To, which is he said whatever this is, X. He said whatever this is. But remember how we can modify a noun with a verb? So if we just throw a Y there, it just simply means a Y called X. A Y called X. So, watashi wa Evan to iu hito. I'm a person called Evan. We could say something like, Kuroga to iu mise. Kuroga to iu mise means a store. Mise, store. To iu, Kuroga to iu mise means a store called Kroger's. Remember how in chapter 1, we learned that when we're lazy and we're quoting, we don't have to say to, we can say small to te. That applies here. Kuroga te iu mise. Giant eagle to iu mise. Here I'm doing some promos. I hope they give me some money. Amazon to iu website. A website called Amazon. That's the same thing. Death Note to iu manga. A manga called Death Note. This is grammar point D. Nothing special. Grammar point D. Nothing special about it. Grammar point F. Yes, I know I'm jumping around, but grammar point F is essentially, once again, grammar point D. We're modifying the noun, which is toki. Sorry, I should write down the furigana just in case you're not sure. The noun toki to mean the time when blah 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 blah. The time when clause this happened. So I just have a basic sentence on the. There's lots of examples in the book. Here's one of my examples. Gaikotsu o mita toki kowakatta. It was scary the time that I saw, notice it's past tense, that I saw a skeleton. It was scary when I saw a skeleton. When I saw that skeleton, I was so scared. Woo! You'll notice that toki, if you go back and look at D and A, grammar points D and A, you'll see that I'm doing almost exactly the exact same thing. I mean, it's not really a new grammar point. The only important part to realize is that this toki just means when, or upon a certain time. That's time that something happened. One thing that this pattern does not do, which is definitely worth mentioning, I'm glad the book mentions it, this isn't a conditional. This isn't a conditional. For example, this sentence, gaikotsu o mita toki kowakatta, does not mean when you saw, like if, we'll have to change it to miru to make that even work, to make this bad example even work. If we say gaikotsu o miru toki kowai, it does not mean if you see a skeleton it will be scary. Oh right, this will have to be E, we'll have to change that too. If you see a skeleton it will be scary, it doesn't mean that if feeling, there's no if to this at all, it's just saying that's time. Upon this happening, this time exists, something will happen. The particle ni is used frequently here, just like any other time, point in time. However, it's not always there, so there you go. Treat it like it's any other noun. It generally has the meaning of when or upon. It is not a conditional. Let's do grammar point B. This is simply introducing a compound particle that you haven't encountered yet. When we mix one noun and another noun, and we want to say, things of the sort, things like that nature, we can use the particle, the particles toka. It's really two particles crammed into one. Toka, the to particle means and the ka particle means or. Hopefully you've already learned those two. So it literally means and or, but we don't translate it that way. Once again, it literally means and or, but we don't translate it that way. It doesn't really communicate the same way. Treat this particle thing treat it just like to, treat it just like ka. Not the sentence final ka, but like the ka or ka. Treat it, I'm talking to the chalkboard again. Treat it just like the ka or the to particle. After the last noun, you can add an extra toka, just to emphasize the fact that things like that. Also, it doesn't have to be a list. It could just be one noun toka, like hon toka no koto wa, things like that. You can do it that way. In general, you treat this like a to particle when you're making a list, x toka, y toka, z toka, and but you can add it at the end of a list. So x toka, y toka. Ga suki desu. I like things like x and y. Also, you can just treat it with just one noun. For example, hon toka ga suki desu. Hon toka ga suki desu. Now you're going to notice, with that toka at the end of a noun, you almost treat it like it's all together one noun. So, like hon toka ga suki desu. I like things like books. Totally works. It works fine. When you're making a list, treat it like the to particle. However, all together sort of turns itself into a chunk of a noun. Okay? Okay, great. See. Okay, next we're going to do grammar point C. This one's sort of basic, but it's worth mentioning. I agree that the book mentions this. When we have the stem of a verb, and we have kaemas or kaeru, we sort of translate that as like to redo something. I don't want you to get too used to using this like, oh, I can just say like redo something. There are other ways to say redo something that are more common and more prevalent. I would treat this more like when you see it, you'll know it. And maybe these are even specific verbs. Almost treat these like these are completely new verbs. Whenever you're using like a clothing verb, like put on your shoulders, put on your belt, or put on your pants, all those are different verbs in Japanese in case you didn't know. You use a stem like ki for kimas, like a shirt. Gaeru or kaeru. Sometimes there's a ga there, sometimes there's not a ga there. Ki gaeru or ki kaemas. And it means to change your shirt, you know, like put on a shirt, you know, put on a new shirt. Also, another very common thing to see is nori kaeru, nori kaemas, which is very important if you're going to Japan because you're going to be transferring trains very often. And you need to actually know what that word means because you're going to hear sentences like, all you in, you know, buses or trains 1 through 4 need to transfer to a new place. And it's a very important word to know in Japan, nori kaeru. Anyway, just be aware that when you have a stem plus kaeru, it generally means like to redo something, do something again, or to change, almost like changing something. In fact, kaemas means to change. So it almost means change your whatever the verb is. So change your riding, get onto a new train. Change your wearing, put on a new shirt. Okay? Change your X, change your verb. There you go. Next grammar point. Grammar point E, X toshite Y. In this grammar point, it's emphasizing the fact that those are both nouns. That doesn't have to be true, but this is worth mentioning. Noun X toshite Y as a noun. Do Y, whatever the rest of your sentence is. You're doing Y as an X. So, you know, the book gives example of like, you know, gaikokugo toshite nihongo o benkyou shitemasu. As for a foreign language, I'm taking Japanese. I'm studying Japanese. So that's one definite situation. One type of usage when they're both nouns. Do Y as an X. I'm studying Japanese as a foreign language. I want to point out though here, because I'm not really sure where this book is going to go with this, but you don't need to have this noun here. In fact, you can even say something like, as your father, I'm going to do something for you. Tosan toshite, oh geez, I don't know, shikarimasu, I'm going to punish you as a father or something like that. And you can make sentences like that. This toshite sort of literally means, you know, as a, or as for, you know, not quite as for, as, acting as in whatever. Acting as an X, something will happen. That's sort of what this literally translates. Acting as an X. Okay? There's your last grammar point. Use it wisely, my good sir. Feel free to donate, feel free to click on some ads, feel free to share with your friends, feel free to go buy some stuff off of Amazon through my website. Give me some money. Money, money, money! Anyway, I hope you learned something today. Have a great day. See ya.